Will Zemaiah Vaughn be the best corner in the Pac-12 in 2023? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment matter more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And today we're talking all things DBs. First, Zemaiah Vaughn. We'll talk about Nate Richie's return to the Utah football team a little bit in a second and close with a little bit of Utah women's basketball talk. And in order to help us do all of that, it's friend of the show and ESPN 700's Porter Larsen. And Porter, look, Clark Phillips left a massive hole on this Utah football team that is going to be difficult to replace. And I don't think anyone's saying Zemaiah Vaughn is going to come in and be one of the best corners in the country overall, but I do think he can still be the best corner in the conference. And I think he could still be in that kind of grouping of guys when you talk about like who are the top 20 corners, like not a first round pick like Phillips was, but I think Zemaiah's got a really high ceiling when you look at what he did last season. And the only comparison I will make to Clark was in 2020, in 2021, Clark led the Utes in passes broken up. And then we know what the jump he made the next year, still raising his play even more. Zemaiah did lead Utah this past season with 9 pass breakups. So he should be the number one guy on the outside. And look, it's Oregon State, Colorado. They got some dudes. There's a lot of other guys throughout the conference, but I think Zemaiah can be the best corner in the Pac-12 because of the physical tools and what we've already seen from him on the outside.
Yeah, JT, if we go back to the preseason, I remember you and I talking DBs, and I talked about that, right? How Clark Phillips is so good that Zemaiah Vaughn's going to get a bunch of opportunities in this coming season. I remember having that same conversation with you, and that's exactly what we saw, right? Zemaiah led the team in pass breakups because teams were challenging him. They saw Clark Phillips on the other side. They saw the pick sixes early in the year. They know what he's capable of, and the fact that CP is a real game breaker. So they challenged Zemaiah Vaughn, and he, for the most part, stacked up and played really well throughout the year. He's a different corner than Clark is, right? They're different players, but now Zemaiah is probably going to move to that role where he's probably going to have to be the lockdown corner on the number one guy or the main piece on that other offense, and he has the tools for it. I mean, he's, like I said, he's a different corner than Clark. He's not the compact physical athlete that he is, and maybe not the game breaker as far as making plays on the ball as far as turnovers go.
Yeah.
But he's 6'2", 180, 185 pounds. Like he's a rangy defender who one-on-one I think has all the tools to be a lockdown corner. And like I said, he has the size for it too, more so than Clark ever did. So as long as this development keeps on going, I think he's an all-conference type player. We've already seen him show that, but now it's his time to showcase the lockdown, the Zemaiah Island. Clark moving on is a big hit, but this Utah defensive backfield has a lot of bodies, both at safety and at corner. Yeah. And then a lot of bodies coming in. We will talk about the guys returning and also the recruits as well, I'm sure. But they're going to have a lot of different options to throw it at defending or to throw at opposing offenses. And Zemaiah is going to be a huge part of that. I think they blanket one side of the field with him, and that allows you to do a lot of things with the weak side. It allows you to throw another defensive back up in the box to play the run. I really liked seeing Sione Vaki in that role at the end of the year. And we're just going to see more of that with more and more bodies coming in. Nate Richie, the recruits, and CJ Blocker and Smith Snowden. We'll get to all that, but man, it's a lot of reason for optimism, and I think that probably starts with Zemaiah Vaughn.
Yeah, Miles Battles transferring in from Ole Miss too. You get
Right.
JT Broughton coming back for another season, and he's still. I think he should be even better this year than he was last year because you think about still having to rehab and get back from injury. This offseason, he's doing nothing but training. So I think there's a lot of reason for optimism for a bounce back year from him. So yeah, it sucks to lose Clark, but you got a lot of talent back there too. And I think one of the things that makes Zemaya's story really cool too is he was a walk on this team, and every single year he's battled and worked his way in to try to get better slowly but surely. I mean, he walked on in 2020, still played in 4 games. Then you look in 2021, he played in all 13 or 4 and 2. I look say only 4 games in 2020. There were only 5 games, I believe, for this Utah team because one of them ended up getting canceled anyway. So doing that in his first year as a walk-on is incredible. Then you played in the 13 games in 2021, making 4 starts too. And look, it only says 7 starts from this past season, but he was one of the 3 best corners on this Utah football team, as we know. And it's just, yeah, it's hard not to be excited because each year he's leveled up a little bit, and he's got phenomenal coaching in that Utah room as well to help him maximize on his talents.
Yeah, absolutely. The starts is a kind of a weird stat, especially when you're looking at Utah DBs because they rotate so many guys. You're oftentimes, if you're the third corner, you may not get the start, but you're playing as many snaps as the other guys just based on the packages that Sharif and Morgan throw out there. And yeah, I mean, he's developed each year, gotten better and better. And coming from a walk-on position, man, that's impressive because he joined this Utah team in 2019, 2020 with NFL talent in the defensive backfield, and he found his way from walk-on to being a solid, consistent contributor. And yeah, we're going to see now. I think the culmination of all that, right? This offseason with the work as the number one guy, you're just going to see him get better and better. And yeah, this defense, we talked about it. I think on the last time I joined you. They weren't down last year. I just think they were young, right?
Yes.
It took some time for them to get into a groove.
Like the Florida game.
Yeah, it took some time for them to really learn not only the system, they knew the system, but how to learn how to play in it in game situations and in game settings. And with the crowd bearing down on you and getting those signals, Morgan, this is one thing that Utah is pretty unique with. It's last second, man. Morgan will be on the sideline waiting for a motion to be sending in signals for his defense, and it's very much a quick snapshot moment where you have to read and react and make that decision as you're getting the call, as you're getting a lot of these things from the sideline. And it took some time for them to adjust to that, but a lot of those guys are now comfortable with that system. And I said it on the last pod. I think this is a team that's going to be a top 10 defense again in 2023.
I definitely feel that way too. And there's going to be a lot of time for us to talk about all the individual pieces. But I feel like, look, Lander Barton, I think, is going to be absolutely sensational this coming season. We already know what Karene Reed is capable of. Mooney joining the grouping to this defensive line that, well, especially on the edge, lacked a lot of pass rush throughout the year. When you look at what Jonah Ellis did, Van Fillinger coming back for another season too. I think when you get a guy too in Logan Fano coming over, I think there's a lot of excitement around him too of what he can eventually kind of grow into and be too off the edge. And look, there's a lot of excitement in the backfield too, not just talk about the corners, but the defensive backs at safety, because I think there's a guy in Nate Richie who's going to be able to do some special things this season that a lot of people have forgotten about in these last couple of seasons while Utah has enjoyed so much immense success. We're going to come back in a moment and talk about Nate Richie, but first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to the points scored to threes drained, everything inside the best NBA action. You can also include the spreads, the money line, the total, player props, points, rebounds, assists. The NBA will be back this Thursday, and there's not a better place to get into the action at than FanDuel Sportsbook. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the unofficial sportsbook partner of the NBA. I also want to talk to you guys about our friends at UCCU. UCCU is opening a new branch in Vineyard to celebrate. UCCU is giving away a 2023 Kawasaki Terry ×4 UTB. Vineyard is one of the fastest growing cities in the state. The new branch offers all the benefits of a UCCU branch, multiple drive-up lanes, 24-hour ATMs, and UC's brand new interactive teller machines, or ITMs for short, which provide all the benefits of meeting with a real UCCU professional, either in the branch or right from your vehicle. It's a virtual connection to a remote teller with a highly personalized audio and video connection. So celebrate the new Vineyard UCCU branch. Enter to win the 2023 Kawasaki Terry ×4 UTV. Winners will be announced in April, just in time for summer fun. Stop by UCCU's new branch in Vineyard, conveniently located next to the Megaplex Theaters and Topgolf, or enter at uccu.com. You don't even have to be a member at UCCU to enter. So there's no excuse, and also there's no purchase necessary to get in on this great offer. UCCU, love where you bank. Porter, there's a lot of excitement about Zemaiah Vaughn. Cole Bishop's another guy back at the safety spot that I think generates a lot of excitement too. And we just talk about Utah DBs. And then there's Nate Richie, kind of the forgotten guy, right? Because he was here in 2020. And these last couple of years, Utah's enjoyed immense success while he was off on his mission. But I think with him coming back this year, I think it's going to be great to see him get back on the field. Because if you look at what he did in 2020, he started all 5 games for the team. He led the secondary with 28 tackles overall, 4 of those being tackles for loss, added a sack, also a fumble, and broke up a pass on the back end. He's a gamer. He's just a guy who's going to go out there and make plays. And I am really excited to see him back on this Utah defense because I think, look, RJ Hubert did a great job last year. But I think Nate Richie's going to make some phenomenal plays too. And it's not like RJ Hubert will be like, it's like, oh man, I really miss the days of RJ, because you're going to have a guy in Nate who is a different player than RJ, but is still going to be making big plays.
Yeah. I think the thing I'm most looking forward to with this defense is seeing how they use all these guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you throw out a bunch of 5 defensive back sets. That's something they already do.
Mm-hmm.
But to have now Sione Vaki, Clayton Isbell, Nate Richie, Cole Bishop. I mean, you have a wealth of personnel on the back end of this defensive backfield, and they all are versatile players. That's the other thing, right? Nate and Cole, I think, are similar in their physicality, their ability to play up in the box and play the run. I would not be surprised at all to see one of those guys not necessarily be a linebacker, but play up towards the line of scrimmage. Maybe a nickel type guy that covers tight ends or slot guys a lot. And I'm really just curious to see how they throw all those guys out there and how they utilize the defensive backfield, because there are, as we talked about, Nate Richie, Cole Bishop, the other safeties that we have coming in. You mentioned transfer from Ole Miss. You have recruits coming in. There's just so many options for Morgan, for Sharif Shaw, and Nate's. I'm curious to see how he is. Obviously, coming back off the mission, that's always a question mark. How those guys were able to, you're not getting any reps out there. You're not doing anything besides probably hoping to stay in shape, reading the playbook. I'm not exactly sure how much they're even allowed to do a lot of that stuff. So, I am always curious about that. But knowing Nate, I know he's a guy that was at the very least really focused on physically being ready, being up to the task. And yeah, man, I think he adds another dynamic, versatile player in that backfield, similar to Cole Bishop. But he does a lot of different things really well that this defense was missing last year. Right. Yes. And yeah, I think that he's going to bring a lot to that defense. And one of the bigger reasons that I do think that they're going to be a little bit improved because of all the different things he does well and the versatility, the kind of player that Morgan and Sharif are really good with, because he does nothing necessarily otherworldly, right? There's not one of those traits that you look at, oh, he's the best in the country at that. Yes. But he does everything really well. And for that, this is a guy who fits into this defense and this scheme really well.
Yeah, and that was kind of the next question I was looking at, is something you really hit on, is how the pairing works with Cole Bishop and Nate Richie. I think Clayton Isbell's in for a huge year, and I think he's going to do a really good job. But the two safeties I trust the most, and I feel like are the best on this team, are Nate Richie and Cole Bishop. But as we mentioned, they both are those stronger safeties. Like, they do a lot of their damage inside the box. So that is going to be the really interesting part to see. Does Nate Richie, because he is a guy who can do a lot of things well, do we see him dropping back more? But while also you want to mix him in and get him in the box because he is so effective there. Cole Bishop played some of his best games inside outside the box last year, I felt like, and a lot of things he was able to do, especially early in the season. So there are a lot of tools, but that's been kind of a theme now. Talk about Zemaiah too, talk about the safeties, the coaching with Coach Shaw, and then what Coach Scally do as well. I feel like they know how to put these guys in the best position to set them up for success. And I think they're going to be just fine. At the end of the day, this is a good problem to have when you have two great players who play a similar style, right?
Well, and not only that, JT, but going into this season in the Pac-12, you look at across the conference, you look at all the passers, you look at all the offenses that are going to throw the ball a lot. I think you're going to see Utah in a 5 DB set more times than not. Probably we saw it a lot as the season wound down last year, especially against some of those more air inclined teams, right, at USC and the like. But I think you're going to see that is maybe even a primary set for Utah coming into the year. Maybe not against Florida as much, but definitely as you go into the Baylor and some of the conference games, you're going to see 5 DBs out there, and it'll be those 5 guys that we just mentioned, and seeing how they're mixed and matched, seeing how they shift with motion, seeing which assignments Morgan is comfortable with them playing. That's going to be one of the bigger question marks, not question marks, but bigger things I'm curious about going into the year, and something I'll be paying real heavy attention to in those first 2 weeks for sure.
Yeah, I think about that stretch late in the season where they're going to play, was it USC, Oregon with Bo Nix? We know they like to sling it to Arizona State. Look, we don't know what exactly it's going to look like. I anticipate them, especially with the 4-star quarterback, they were just able to bring in Jaden Rashada, I believe is his name. His talent he has. I think they're going to be thrown around a lot. I expect a lot of 3 receiver sets there. And then we know going up to Washington. I mean, we know what Michael Penix just did this past year too. You get Arizona not long after that. So especially late in the season, which is nice too, because we've already talked about a lot about Smith Snowden and CJ Blocker a little bit too, where it's like those guys will be able to get some of that experience. So if injuries and things kind of change and get impacted, those guys will have some reps and be ready, because there's going to be a lot of plays where you're going to be dropping back to defend the pass over and over again. And it's hard to do that play after play. It's why we talked about DB stats being so weird in terms of starts, because you can get so many reps out there where it's a good thing that there's depth in this room, because these guys are going to be getting a lot of run, especially in October and November.
Yeah, as the season goes along, it just becomes more and more the case. I don't have many worries about that. I do.
I agree.
Because of all the teams that you're going to be playing that have that pass-heavy offense, I do wonder how Utah gets pressure with 4, because you're going to have to, even a lot of times 3 and 4 guys going at the quarterback, you're going to have to find ways to get pressure. And they struggled with that at times this year. I think Gabe Reed really came on strong. Obviously, Fillinger came on strong before the injury, but you didn't have that Mika Tafua, the Bradley and Nye, right? You didn't have a guy that set the edge and was a threat to make a tackle for loss or a sack every play. You didn't necessarily have that. And I'm curious to see, especially going into this year where, man, you're going to see a lot of quarterbacks standing in that pocket. And with those heavy DB sets, you're going to have to get pressure with 3 or 4 guys. And I am curious to see how that develops. We talk about Tamouni, we talk about the guys that are coming in. Some of the younger pieces to Utah's defense that we saw kind of emerge late in the year, or Van Fillinger, who we saw emerge before the injury, they're going to have to be really good and improved upon this next year. And I think they can. I think they have the bodies to do it. But I am curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and they got some guys. I mentioned Fano a little bit ago. I mean, he's a guy who had 20 sacks in high school, top 5 recruit in the state. Coming off the injury, what does he look like in year 1? I'm not sure, but especially late in the season, that's where he could get going. In a way, we kind of saw Jonah Ellis come on a little bit, and I think a leap for him would also be big in terms of creating a lot of that pressure this team is going to need. So it's going to be a lot of fun and interesting to see how it plays out, and it's been fun to see how the Utah women's basketball team has done this year. They've been absolutely outstanding. We're going to come back in a moment and talk about them and the huge weekend they have coming up, because the Stanford Cardinal are coming to town. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at RC Willy. RC Willy is hiring delivery drivers in the Salt Lake area. If you're looking for a rewarding career with a great group of people, come work for RC Willy, Utah's largest home furnishing store. RC Willy is currently hiring delivery drivers at their largest warehouse by the Salt Lake City airport. Delivery drivers are the face of RC Willy, and they're looking for great delivery drivers in the northern Utah area. Compensation for delivery drivers is $24 an hour during training, and our average delivery driver makes $50,000, $80,000 per year. RC Willy offers a $1,000 sign-on bonus and hands-on training, including CDL training, but No CDL is required right away. RC Willy associates say they love their job and the benefits are great, and the culture at RC Willy is one of the best. Many of their employees have even been there for over 20 years. Come make a difference and join America's home furnishing store of choice. Apply online at rcwilly.com/jobs. That's rcwilly.com/jobs. Porter, the Utah women's basketball team has been having an outstanding season. I mean, they fell a little bit this week, right? Whenever you lose on the road to Arizona, that's what's going to happen. But overall, I mean, when you're talking about 23-3, they have great wins on the season too. They've already beaten Arizona. They absolutely walloped Oklahoma when they came out to Salt Lake early on. And yeah, I mean, the loss at Arizona, it hurts a little bit, but it doesn't do too much to diminish what the ceiling and what this team can do. And they got games against California and Stanford coming up this weekend. Stanford currently the third ranked team. It's going to be awesome to see how that one plays out. But with Alyssa Peely, Coach Roberts, the way she has this team working, one loss doesn't faze me. I mean, and once again, they've won 20 more games than they have lost. So I think that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it off air a little bit, that it's a team that these games are, especially once you've already won 23 games, they're, positioning. You're playing for seeding in the tournament. I think we already know this team has a ceiling that is a pretty deep run. They're that good, right? They've gone and beaten some of the better teams in the country. We'll see them against Stanford to close the year in 2 home games, which I think is good for them as well, going into a Pac-12 tournament down there in Las Vegas. But yeah, like I said, they're playing for seeding right now. You saw them rest a little bit. Alyssa Peely out in one of those games. So at this point, I think they know what they are and they know what they're capable of. Losses here and there are going to happen over the course of a long Pac-12 schedule. But I do think these next 2 games, finishing on at least a positive note, whether it's 2-0 or not, just being, a semblance of what they were earlier in the year, not looking like they did in Tempe, would be huge for them going into the Pac-12 tournament. I think they just need to get back into that rhythm, get some of their key pieces back. And I really don't have any worry about Lynn Roberts' squad. I think they very, very likely can contend for a Pac-12 title and a deep run in the NCAA tournament. Game in Tempe and a game against a ranked Arizona team don't really change that for me. It's all about getting healthy and getting back into that rhythm that they were in, where they were scoring, JT, I think 92 points a game over the course of the first 2-3 months of the season. I mean, you get back to that, you get back to the shooting that you were able to achieve early in the year, and you're going to be really tough to beat in February and March. And yeah, that's always a big variable, right? Because shooting and field goal percentages are always so up and down. You live by the 3, you die by the 3. And for Utah, that's really, really the case. Lynn, it's either a layup or it's a 3. That's their ethos, right? And when you do that, you either have to be really aggressive, getting to the bucket, getting free throws, or you got to be hitting from downtown. And that's the question mark, right, with this team. And it's going to be fun to see because they have the shooters. It's just going to be about the right timing for them to get into a groove. And if they can find one like they did early in the year, could be an exciting run to end the year.
I feel like it's definitely trending that way, so it's going to be fun to check out. But you mentioned all the talent. I mean, Alyssa Peely, Gianna Neepkins, Jenna Johnson, Kennedy McQueen, Deja Young, and we could go on and on. There's so much talent on this roster. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what they can not just do in Pac-12 play, but as you mentioned, I totally agree with you. I think we got a deep run in the NCAA tournament incoming.
Yeah, you mentioned all the names, man. It's a lineup that is just filled up with shooters. Alyssa Peely, just one of the more consistent scorers in the country, right? She does everything right on the floor, and I do think it is more about kind of settling back in, getting into that rhythm, getting into the flow of the offense that you had earlier in the year. And I think it's a really good chance to do that against Cal, and then going into the Stanford game. Even if they don't go 2-0, like I said, it's a good chance for them to build that rhythm and get back into the confidence that they had early on. And I do think that their ceiling and their finish to the season is going to rely on field goal percentage. When you're a team that shoots it this much, that's kind of the reality, which I don't know. Sometimes that's tough. You go back to the Jazz a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Every 3-point record you could ever imagine. As a Knicks fan, my Knicks did that in 2012. broke every 3-point record you could ever imagine. And then in the playoffs, they went cold. And sometimes that's the reality of when you are a jump shot reliant team. That being said, that's when you can get it down to Alyssa Peely. You can create some different looks. And when you are that good of a shooting team, teams in the tournament, teams in the Pac-12 tournament, they're going to play you that way. They're going to be running you off the 3-point line, and that gives you some opportunities to do things maybe you haven't done as much all year, which is slashing, getting to the rim, getting to the free throw line, and that leaves some options for Lynn Roberts' squad. But I think if we want to look at it earnestly, it's all about shooting that 3-point shot and how many of them go down.
It definitely is. And the nice thing about these weekend games, talk about them Thursday and then Saturday, they're at home. So Utah fans come out, support the team. It's a great product the Utah women's basketball team is putting out there. So make sure you guys head up to both the women's game and the men's game coming up, a doubleheader on Saturday. So it'll be fun to shake those out. Porter, I got a quick question before we get you out of here quick. Are college football games too long?
No.
I agree 1,000% with you.
I saw a little bit about this online earlier. And listen, there are some things that I think we could do to speed them up. If you go back to, I think, the Pac-12, or late in the Pac-12 year, they had the replay crew sending down like obvious reviews that were reversed, and the rest didn't go over to the little monitor. They didn't they didn't interrupt to stop the game. They just changed it. Now they need to communicate some of those things a little better on the broadcast, because that was confusing at a couple points. Those kind of things are things I want to see. I want to see a replay review center at the conference. I want to see it at the NFL level. They're trying it at the XFL, but it's something we've talked about a lot. There are certain things where you can speed up the review process, maybe take out some things here or there. And I get that to speed up the flow of the game. But as far as the actual football, like 60 minutes of football, 10, 11 times a year, that's not too much. In fact, it's too little, JT.
Like I said, I think the biggest thing by far is the replay. Like that's the thing. And instead they're talking about all these other rule changes and things they want to make. Let's get the replay fixed first. And I think that would help a lot of things. So hopefully they're able to do that. Porter, where should people check you out if they want to learn more about you and what you do with ESPN 700?
Yeah, of course, every afternoon with Spence, 2 to 6-ish, doing all the NBA, Utes, RSL, whatever it may be, coverage over there. You can hear us on air, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM now over on the FM side. And then obviously we podcast everything we do. So you search the drive, you search ESPN 700, we're all up there, and at ESPN700sports.com as well.
Make sure you guys head over there and check it out. All of the stuff at ESPN 700. Also, if you guys are in the market for a second listen every day, we recommend you check out the Locked On College Basketball podcast. Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, you can hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Big thanks to Porter Larsen once again for joining us. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes, but we'll see you tomorrow.